take just the killing school. Class start next week. You gotta at least have 2 bodies.
Lil Jeff earned a reputation as one of the most feared and ruthless figures in the streets. His violent nature became well known, especially because he treated it like a game. He even referred to his actions as a killing school, setting a brutal and unforgiving standard for anyone who wanted to be part of his world. Unlike others who tried to hide their crimes, Lil Jeff seemed to enjoy the attention. He turned violence into entertainment, openly rapping about the people he had killed in his diss tracks. He had no remorse, mocking his fallen enemies in his lyrics and making it clear that he had no sympathy for them. His social media presence was just as disturbing. He spoke about real-life murders on Instagram as if they were nothing more than a joke, casually discussing deadly shootings with the same energy as someone gossiping about everyday life. But he didn't just talk about violence, he lived it. In one of his most shocking acts, he shot 2 of his own high school classmates and continued to make jokes about it afterward, showing no sign of guilt or hesitation. These were some of Lil Jeff's most ruthless acts, cold-blooded, unfiltered, and terrifyingly savage. He operated with a clear motto: strike first, be brutal. He believed in attacking before his enemies could even think about retaliating. One of his most notorious crimes was an execution carried out in broad daylight, without a mask, in front of unsuspecting witnesses. Lil Jeff was not the type to let things slide. If someone from his crew was killed, he made sure there was payback. On May 13, 2021, he followed through on that belief once again. That day seemed like any other in Chicago, specifically near East 79th Street. Cars moved along the road, people stood around chatting, and customers walked in and out of local shops. No one realized that a murder was about to unfold right in front of them. Lil Jeff had been keeping a close eye on his target, someone known as Lil Gutter. His real name was Ronnie Lcis Intoxicated Jr., and whether he knew it or not, he was being hunted. Jeff had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He wasn't reckless, he was calculated. He watched from a distance, studying his target's movements, looking for any signs of weakness. Once he was sure the time was right, he made his move. What happened next was brutal. Without hesitation, Jeff walked up and fired a series of deadly shots. It wasn't a rushed attack. Every shot was precise and intentional. By the time people around realized what was happening, it was too late. Lil Gutter lay motionless, his life taken in an instant. For Jeff, this was just another day. He didn't flee in a panic or show any fear. He carried out the execution just as he had done before, calm, confident, and merciless. He lived by a code of violence, and nothing seemed to shake him. As news of the killing spread, fear gripped the community. Some people whispered about what had happened, while others chose to stay silent, too afraid to speak out. Those who knew Jeff understood that he wasn't someone to be crossed. But in the streets, there's always another side to the story. Every action leads to a reaction, and every killing sparks another cycle of revenge. While Jeff may have gotten away that day, it was only a matter of time before the consequences caught up with him. His story is a chilling reminder of the never-ending cycle of violence that grips some neighborhoods. For Lil Jeff, life was all about power, control, and striking fear into his enemies. But in a world where retaliation is inevitable, even the most feared figures eventually face their fate. For a time, Gutter was strolling about the city as if he had no enemies, carefree, but his name had already been connected to the murder of Craw a month before, and that was a major issue. It didn't matter whether Gutter was really involved. What mattered was that Jeff thought Jeff was not the kind to hurry things, so he waited for the ideal opportunity. Gutter had just left a shop and was looking at his phone. Jeff went in swiftly without saying anything or warning, and then the first bullet struck Gutter in the chest. Before he could respond, his phone slipped out of his hands and his body twitched. Another shot followed, each one intended to ensure he wasn't getting back up. Some people yelled, some fled, and others ducked. Jeff left, disappearing into the throng as if nothing had occurred, and by the time the cops showed there, Gutter had already passed away. Witnesses had seen the incident, but nobody wanted to speak anything since everyone knew who was at fault. The streets were already hushing about the noon hit, but Jeff. The drill scene had always been full of bold lyrics and street talk, but in March 2024, a song was released that left people wondering if the words were genuine confessions or just music. He didn't stop there. He took his savagery to the microphone and turned 7 bodies into lyrics, boasting about killing 7 people. The song, titled FTO, became one of the most talked about songs of the year as soon as it hit the streets. Lil Jeff and Vert had been teasing the release for weeks, so when it did drop, the excitement was Rough, aggressive, and careless, there was no filter on the lyrics. One aspect of the song stood out more than the others, but Jeff's delivery of his boast about stealing 7 lives was too particular and comprehensive, leaving listeners to question if he had really accomplished what he claimed. Jeff used the statement to ridicule Lil's death and called him out by name.
"We smoke him because we're all stupid in a pack."
It wasn't just a rude remark, it was a straightforward celebration of someone's death, and it wasn't the only thing that offended people. Another stanza spoke on how his former pals, with whom he was formerly cool, are now his operations. The song spread fast, was played in cars, blasted at parties, and discussed in drill forums as people argued over whether Jeff's claims were overblown or if he had actually dropped the bomb.
He also mentioned that his crew had shot so much on Rads Avenue that their enemies had to close their drug spots.
If this was true, it meant that his side had not only taken lives but also taken over entire trap operations, forcing their rivals to leave the area. 7 corpses, whatever the truth, one thing was certain. Jeff's reputation for self-snitching was already building, but he took it to the next level. Was he truly keeping track, or was he just inflating his numbers?
Jeff showed no fear of what he said or who heard it.
That question didn't linger long, since Jeff's next statement made it obvious that when he rapped up about murder, it wasn't fiction. He killed Lil Pooh in retaliation for ZS money because he had been waiting for the proper opportunity and made sure it was. Ruthless said in March 2023, Jeff set his sights on Lil Pooh, whose real name was Pierre Boozer Jr. He had been acting as though nothing had changed. He still appeared in familiar places, laughed with his people, and pretended that his name wasn't being whispered in the streets, but Jeff had already made up his mind that Pooh wouldn't be around for the summer. The plan had been put in motion days earlier, and Jeff didn't just roll up and start. Money's death had left a wound that only blood could heal. Instead of firing, he used Pooh's own habit to work against him. Knowing Pooh would hear it, he used mutuals to spread the word that a certain block was safe once again. The trap was set, and Pooh took the bait by appearing as though nothing was wrong. He pulled into his driveway, which he always went to after a long day, and stepped out, nodding at a familiar face. The night was quiet, with only the distant hum of the city in the background, and everything appeared normal until the lights in the lot flickered a little. During that brief moment of distraction, a figure emerged from the shadows. The first shot struck Pooh's leg, which fell to the ground, and grabbed his knee as he attempted to crawl toward his house, but he failed. More shots came quickly and relentlessly after that, the last of which struck him in the back of the head, leaving him face down on the pavement as the car's tires screeched and the engine roared.
The shooter then vanished.
When the police came, no one had seen anything, but a year later, the streets knew.
Witnesses were frozen. Jeff
made sure the message was clear when he commented on an Instagram post about Pooh, confirming that disrespecting Z Money had consequences. Then, days before Jeff's death, he wrapped up a song that had been leaked, detailing how Pooh had been caught after taking out Lil Pooh. While most people would have remained silent, Jeff wasn't done proving himself. His next moment came quickly, and this time, bullets were flying from a moving car ordered as a drive-by on Black. Lil Jeff had made many enemies, and when things became serious, he didn't think twice about removing them. In March 2022, the streets were abuzz with rumors of a drive-by shooting and conversation. The target was Roger Lewis, also known as Black, a 33-year-old local legend who had been well respected. That evening, Black was standing outside his home talking to someone without paying attention to the road when a car slowly rolled by. The people inside were watching him intently, waiting for the right moment, and the driver remained steady. The window was slightly open as the car approached, and then there was a brief pause before the sound of rapid gunfire filled the air. Black barely had time to react before the car sped off, disappearing down the street before anyone could get a good look at it. Some people ran inside their homes, while others peeked out, realizing there was nothing they could do. By the time the police arrived, Black had already vanished. A month after the shooting, a guy named Trayvon Dix was taken into custody, but rumors persisted that Jeff had ordered the hit because tensions between his gang and Black people had been rising, and this seemed like a way to make up. Jeff let his music speak for itself, as he usually did, but he never responded to the allegations. A few weeks later, he released a song that left many wondering. In it, he spoke about how some older men believe they can get away with it until they are caught. Being outdoors at the wrong moment, a drive-by, was certainly an exciting event, but Jeff always went above and above. When 2 dead were discovered on the same night, the streets realized that this was not only war, but also the masterminds behind 2 murders. Despite his extensive involvement in street violence, November 1, 2023, stands out as one of Lil Jeff's most vicious episodes. Donato Buford, also known as Lil Juice, and Desiree McGee, also known as D-Money, were the two victims of what many thought was a premeditated execution that night. A black SUV had been circling the area, passing by once and then again slowly. No one inside the car made any sudden movements. They were waiting for the right moment. Then, the SUV stopped a few feet away, the door swung open, and before anyone could react, the gunman stepped out and opened fire glass. The friends had been sitting in a parked car on South Dorchester Avenue, probably thinking it was just another night, talking, scrolling through their phones, or just passing the time. Broken bullets tore through flesh and metal. The attack was over in a matter of seconds, but by the time the gunman got back into the SUV and drove away, the damage had already been done. Both victims were critically injured and taken to the University of Chicago Medical Center, but it was too late for them to survive. The police arrived promptly and discovered several shell casings scattered throughout the scene, but as usual, no one was willing to speak, so the case remained open and no charges were ever brought. Despite Jeff's denials, the streets had their own method of verifying information. In March 2024, Jeff shared a mysterious Instagram story that had just a few emojis but was understood by many to be a list of names, one of which was obviously connected to D. The murder of Money. You would expect that Jeff would wish to remain silent after double murder, but instead he was in the studio singing about his victims, including details that only the murderer knew, and confessing to murder in his song. By early 2024, Lil Jeff's name was already connected to endless street whispers, but when he revealed his identity in February, the discussion changed and it wasn't the same old routine. With its dark pace and strong flow, this track, which was full of threats and rough talk, felt like a confession, but it was the lyrics that drew listeners in with one terrifying statement. For those who recalled how Monty and Lil Rob were killed, Jeff's description of a victim crying before dying and the manner he rapped it as if reliving the scene instantly linked them to the crimes. Slain because the details were too precise to overlook. Lil Rob's last moments were very similar to what Jeff was rapping about, and Monty had been left on the pavement, gasping for oxygen. Within hours of its publication, the internet went crazy. People were deconstructing the songs and relating them to actual occurrences in Reddit posts. There was debate on drill forums about whether Jeff was boasting or inviting danger. While some supporters justified him by claiming he was only narrating a tale, others said he had done what many rappers had done before him. Accused of self-snitching in the booth. This wasn't the first time Jeff had been suspected of incorporating actual murders into his songs, but I took it a step further. This time, it wasn't just about who was hit or where it happened. It was about how they died, what they said in their final moments, and how Jeff felt watching it happen. He never answered the accusations or explained what they meant, but he didn't have to because the damage had already been done. Rapping about bodies is one thing, but saying it live is a. The energy on Instagram felt different on the night of May 13, 2024, when thousands of people were watching to see what Lil Jeff would say next. He sat in front of the camera, relaxed, and flipped through a thick stack of money. His wrist sparkled every time he moved the diamonds on his Rolex, catching the light. Jeff laughed as he updated his body count to 10 on Instagram Live. The comments section moved so quickly that it was impossible to keep up as the live stream progressed. The discussion took a sinister turn when Jeff began discussing the streets, the people he had lost, and those who had died as a result of him. He smirked, leaned back, and made a remark that stunned everyone in the audience.
Some supporters pumped him up.
Whether they were watching or someone showed them the video, his adversaries were astonished, but he made it obvious that the number of bodies had increased beside him. The Q50, his own numbers were inserted by a close acquaintance. The live stream continued with Jeff taunting his rivals, daring them to respond, and laughing as he fanned out his money, showing no concern for what he had just admitted. It didn't take long for the clip to spread on Reddit forums and drill pages, and even law enforcement were talking about it. People tried to figure out whether Jeff was being serious or if it was just for attention, but those who knew how if claiming 10 corpses wasn't crazy enough, Streets Work felt that every word he spoke made him a greater target, not only for the police, but also for the individuals he had been calling out. It was one thing to move in quiet, but going live and screaming it aloud was quite another. People were left speechless by Jeff's further actions, which included murdering and demanding the same of anybody who wanted to roll with him. Lil Jeff's Instagram post from early February 2024 boasted about his school mandatory killing. Got the city talking when he said that he would establish a school for killings and that at least 2 corpses would be needed. You must at least have 2 bodies, however, since I won't be arriving with none, and I can't work with no beginners. That's not all. I'm bringing this to Kill School class, which starts next week. The article began with an accusation from his critics that they were killing innocent people rather than dealing with actual street issues.
It was a clear jab at those who had been
talking about his name, but the accompanying photo, in which Jeff had a new tattoo, was what really grabbed attention. 10 Tears. The streets were already aware that each teardrop represented a body and LIF, and some even conjectured that 2 of them were for Lil Rob and Monty, 2 names associated with previous murders. As if that weren't enough, he carefully arranged a number of emojis in the caption so that they appeared to correspond with 10 victims. Although the message was obvious, it wasn't straightforward enough to constitute a confession.
Jeff knew how to convey a lot without saying too much.
His close friend Q50 didn't let the moment pass, and he updated his body count to 8 in a follow-up post. If anyone had any doubts about Jeff's claims, hearing Q50 validate his own numbers only made them seem more credible. The discussion surrounding the post quickly grew, with some people laughing it off and claiming he was just rapping. Jeff had previously said that amateurs were not welcome on his circle, but when he sent a mysterious message that seemed to be a list of his victims, the internet couldn't help but publish a mysterious statement enumerating them. Known for igniting controversy, Lil Jeff went one step further in April 2024 when, rather than making a direct statement, he posted a message that had the entire city talking. The post included lyrics from an unreleased King Von song, but what really grabbed people's attention was what Jeff did next. Beneath the lyrics, he included 10 emojis. At first glance, it seemed random, but the streets soon began piecing it together. Since the woman's hat emoji was more distinctive than the others, fans quickly connected it to D-Money, a well-known figure in street culture. They thought it was a disguised allusion to his female moniker, a cunning way of implying that he was the murderer without really stating so. The discussion quickly grew. Was he naming his victims or was this a body count? Others referred to it as another instance of self-snitching, which Jeff had already been charged with many times, while others said it was a means of mocking his adversaries. Despite the criticism, Jeff refused to remove the post. He never clarified its meaning or addressed the rumors, instead allowing people to argue and debate while his name spread even more. It was obvious that Jeff wanted people to keep guessing and that he made sure they never stopped talking. Some killers accidentally leave evidence behind, but Jeff turned it into a moment. He wasn't only delivering a message when he displayed bleeding hands and stolen watches, he was making fun of them. The deceased taunts officers with bleeding hands and pilfered watches. Lil Jeff had always used social media, but in early 2024 he used it to send a message that garnered widespread attention. This time, it wasn't a song, a mysterious caption, or a live stream. Rather, it was a series of images that spoke louder than words. The first image featured 2 pricey watches, both of which were visible on his wrist. The jewelry was of a type that only a select few people in the city could afford, but it wasn't about the cost. Rather, it was about who they belonged to. Quick that they were taken from 6,300 Brato, a well-known competitor. In order to make sure Bryat and his people understood the disrespect, Jeff didn't just take them, he posted them online. The second image was even worse. His hands were covered in blood, and it was obvious that he was saying that he had done something violent that elevated him to a new level in the streets. Whether this was a genuine confession or merely a ploy to improve his reputation, the message was the same. He wanted his enemies to know he wasn't alive. He chased an OP into a house and was shot down in the streets. Whether or not he was involved, the damage was done. And the post became one of the most disturbing moments of his career, adding to the long list of reasons why people saw him as one of the most reckless figures in the drill scene. Every move has repercussions. Some take longer to manifest, but they always do for Lil Jeff. June 8th. On South Rhodes Avenue, a location that had seen its share of shootouts but nothing like this, everything finally came up with him in 2024. It was a moment that would mark the brutal end of a name that had generated chaos and dread for years. The guy Jeff was pursuing ran toward a home, seized the door, and vanished inside. Most people would have paused, but Jeff didn't stop. He followed without thinking. Witnesses observed Jeff pursue an adversary moving quickly, resolute, and focused on only one thing. Certain he had the upper hand inside the threshold, but as soon as he stepped inside, gunshots broke out. The home was not a safe haven for his adversary. Rather, it was a trap. The occupants had been waiting, and Jeff had walked right into their plan. The rounds came from many directions. Before Jeff had a chance to defend himself, 19 bullets ripped into his body. His team, who had been just behind him, instantly returned fire, transforming the peaceful street into a battlefield. By the time the gunfire stopped, the damage was irreparable. There were 58 bullet casings. When the police arrived, The house was deserted, the people who had set the trap had vanished, and Jeff was gone. His story ended the same way he had lived, surrounded by gunfire, with no second chances, and the floor was covered in blood. Jeff's crew saw him lying there, barely clinging to life. They had the option to stay and fight or to flee.
Thank you for viewing.
To see more related content, click on one of the boxes that is playing on your screen.